This 2025 AL West Divisional Betting Preview edition of the MLB Gambling Podcast on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network is brought to you by Edge Boost. Earn up to $750 per month on your sports gambling transactions. Go to edgeboost.bet, promo code SGPN. We're also brought to you by Rhythm, the leader in data-driven picks and props. Rhythm is giving away a $250 future and throwing a March Madness party. Go to sportsgamblingpodcast.com/party for all the details. Welcome, everyone, to the MLB Gambling Podcast on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. Here to get into our divisional previews for the 2025 MLB season. The first of 6 divisions will tackle the American League West Division here on this episode. We'll go through every single team, win totals, talk about division odds, pennant odds, World Series odds, and kind of break down the rosters and what we're expecting from these teams in the 2025 MLB season. But joining me here on this episode to help me break everything down, you guys know him as the voice of the Tennis Gambling Podcast, WNBA, NBA, and of course here on the MLB Gambling Podcast, Scott Studio Reichel. Scott, what's going on, my man? We're back.
Yeah, it feels good to be back. I feel like everyone's been focusing on college basketball and the NBA, and they might have forgotten that, baseball's right around the corner. But it should be fun to get into these divisions, but looking forward to the AL West. Should be an interesting one. So definitely starting off on, I'd say, a bit of a high note because there are some divisions out there that feel like a foregone conclusion. Mm-hmm. This one's definitely not one of them.
Yeah, 100%. This division's getting a little bit more competitive. Teams that are getting better, teams maybe taking a step back, maybe a surprise in this division. We'll get into all that here, of course. But yeah, like you mentioned, we're, I think, 2 weeks away from the Tokyo series between the Cubs and the Dodgers. And then a week after that, it'll be the opening day and weekend for the MLB season. So the plan for the MLB pod is going to be going twice a week to do the division previews. We'll start with the AL West today, and then on Thursday, we'll have some rotation of the hosts covering the NL East division. Then we'll work our way over the next several weeks. Save a announcement for the Propcast featuring MLB. Spoiler alert at the end of the episode there. So adding some more baseball content, I should say, on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network this season, Scott. But let's get into it here, man. 5 teams in this division. We'll go from the bottom to the top as far as win totals go in this division. And we'll start it here with the first team. 2 teams that have similar win totals. We'll start here with the Los Angeles Angels, currently sitting at 71.5 wins for their win total this season. Division odds are sitting at 30-1, 120-1 for the AL pennant, and then 200-1 for the World Series for this Los Angeles Angels team. And of course, last season, another year, Scott, where Mike Trout dealt with injuries throughout the season, only played in a handful of games last year. He is going to be ready for opening day this year for the Los Angeles Angels, making a shift to, I believe it's right field, if I'm not mistaken, for Mike Trout for this upcoming year. But I think there's a lot to be desired for this team going forward. And I think the biggest question mark will be that, for me at least, for this Angels team, Scott, is Mike Trout still going to be on this roster come to the trade deadline for this Los Angeles Angels team? But we can start with the win total. Give your thoughts on the roster construction. We'll kind of go through it, but what are you thinking about this Los Angeles Angels team coming up for this year?
Yeah, so they have the longest odds to win the division and the longest odds to do anything pretty much worth a damn for a reason, because the team is, well, not expected to be that good. And if you want to go to the depth chart, definitely not pretty. Can I interest you in borderline number 1 overall starter, Yosei Kikuchi? Can I interest you in that for the upcoming season?
I'll say this much. He was pretty good last year when he got traded to the Astros. I think the inclination was that they were not going to bring him back just because the Astros, and we'll talk about that team later in this episode, that they had guys that were injured, so they needed somebody to come in. But no, Kikuchi at the top of that rotation does not excite me at all.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, though, because the Angels, despite being a really bad team or a projected really bad team, Have a decent setup and closer situation though with Ben Joyce and Kenley Jansen. So it's
Yeah.
kind of interesting that the back end of the bullpen should be decent while they're winning games. The problem is they won't be leading many games late, so we'll see what happens. But I mean, you're looking at some of the moves they made. They got Mancada. They ended up getting Soler. They ended up getting a couple pieces here or there. But as you said before, they moved Trout to right field. I don't think this team's going to be very good. I mean, the argument for this team would be, well, last year they were in the basement of the division, but you were looking at Trout missing a bunch of time. They're hoping that by moving him that they'll be able to keep him basically alive longer in the season, and maybe if that happens, they'll be able to get over this number. They got the 63 last year, so they were 63 and 99, and Trout barely played. So I am going to ask you, though, because they were behind Oakland last year. I know we're going to talk about Oakland in a second. Do you think this is the worst team in the division?
Yeah. I'm a little higher on the Oakland A's this season than of this Los Angeles Angels team. And it's what you mentioned, right? The pitching rotation, the starting rotation it doesn't excite me. I mean, there's nothing really there that has a number one starter for this team. You'll see flashes from Soriano maybe, and Reed Detmers has his moments, but the inconsistencies from Reed Detmers is something that gives me pause about this rotation. And again, it's also been a rotation that I mean, when you add Kyle Hendricks, again, a guy that's probably gonna have an ERA above 4.5 at minimum, in my opinion. Tyler Anderson was pretty good when he was with the Dodgers, but taking a little bit of a step back now that he's with the crosstown team in the Los Angeles Angels here. So a lot of it for me, and we'll talk about these teams, is that it really comes down to the starting pitcher for me. And again, I think they have the worst starting rotation in this division by far.
Yeah, I have to agree. Just going down the line of the rotation, I mean, you're looking at Kikuchi, Anderson, Soriano, Hendricks, and Kochanowicz. Yeah, good luck with that. Especially with the Kyle Anderson part of that too. Once again, it's kind of weird because their bullpen does not look that bad. You could argue the middle relief's not great, but I mean, this team. I'll put it this way though, for the sake of argument, yes, we don't think this team's going to do anything in the division. However, their win total's at 71.5.
Yep.
How many games does Trout need to play for you to feel decent about an over on 71.5 wins?
So last season he played 40 some odd games, was it? Last year?
I want to quickly confirm how many games he played, because once again, all the years kind of blend together, to be honest with you.
Oh, 29 last year.
That's what I'm saying. I don't think. Yeah, that sounds about right. He didn't even get to 40. They would have killed for 40, but he got to 29. So, I mean, I feel like we're going to agree that there's no point in talking about them to do anything in terms of playoffs or division title or whatever. The only argument would be win total.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you, how many games do you think Trout needs to play?
I think it would have to be 90 plus at minimum. I think the number that first popped in my head was 100. Okay. But he's only done that once since the 2020 season. Of course, we had a shortened season with COVID. But last 5 seasons, Scotty's played 53, 36, 119 in 2022, 82 in 2023, and then 29 just last year. So just last 2 years combined, he's only played in 111 games for this Angels team. So my number is around that 90 to 100 mark. It's a big range, but I think if he can play 100 games this season, I think they could get over their win total. But again, it's just one man at the end of the day.
Do you think moving him to right is going to help him with that? Or do you think that he's just, at this point, damaged goods, that it doesn't really matter what they do?
I mean, look, when we know that when he's healthy, when he's in the everyday lineup, he's one of the more dynamic players in the entire MLB. You can say he's one of the best players. I again, like you mentioned, it's everything that you want to keep him healthy. But I think moving him to right field, I think that will help him. Center field, of course, we know one of the more tougher positions in baseball as far as the defensive side. You have shortstop. I think center field is the other one, in my opinion. But I think moving him, I think it's the right move, for this Angels team. Just hoping that you at least can get, 100 games out of him. So I think it's the right move for him to keep him healthy.
I think it's the right move to potentially switch positions. I don't know why he's not DHing at this point.
That's a good point as well.
I feel like you can argue that if the Angels' sole purpose is to remain either A, somewhat relevant, or B, just to make him look good enough that they could ship him off in a
Right.
hypothetical
Yeah.
situation. I would be DHing him for like 80% of the games, if not more,
Yeah.
because I feel like keeping him in the outfield, yes, there's a less area to cover in right field, but
Hmm.
I don't trust him to play more than 60 games in a season at
Right.
this point. So I would probably be DHing him a decent amount, but for the sake of the Angels, I'll go under on this. I don't think he ends up playing 100 games. I think that 63 last year is a pretty similar number to what I'm expecting this year. Maybe could argue a bit more with Jansen there as a reliever to help with the bullpen, but I thought Joyce was fine towards
Yeah.
the back end of the year as a closer. So maybe I'll go with a little bit of a bump for the Angels, but like 68, I don't see them getting
Yeah.
to 72. So I'll go under.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think this is going to be the team that's going to be the bottom feeder in the American League West division. And again, it's a situation where you want to keep him healthy, and there's a possibility that I think that he could be on the move. And I think a good spot, the first game or the first team that pops into my mind is a team like the Phillies that can use him at that top of the rotation, or sorry, the lineup with Bryce Harper. Of course, he's from the Philly area, so it just makes sense. But I mean, that's just here and there what I'm thinking. Also, like Kenley Jansen, right? I mean, that's another guy that could, if he's having a great season in a team that needs some bullpen help come trade deadline, that is a contending team, they'll maybe come out and call the Angels for his services. So, you could probably have some players on the move here for this Los Angeles Angels team. So we won't waste any more time on the Angels here. Under 71.5 would be the look here for both myself and Scott. All right, Scott, before we do continue the preview here for the AL West division, let me just remind everybody, gear up for March with Merch Madness. Promo code Madness for 20% off in the SGPN store. Get it now before the promo code is done. Again, that's promo code Madness over on the store.sportsgamblingpodcast.com. First half under t-shirts can be very, very popular this time of the year, of course, because it's a staple here at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network for those first couple of rounds there. So get in the merch store, check it out, maybe get some MLB Gambling Podcast gear while you're there as well with the upcoming MLB season. All right, Scott, let's get into the next team here. Same win total is going to be the Oakland A's. They are currently at 71.5 as well. Division odds of 30-1. AL pennant is 100-1, and then for them to win it all is 250-1. Obviously, out of the dump now of the Oakland Coliseum, they're moving over to Sacramento for the time being until they get their new stadium done in Vegas. Did see some news that they're maybe going to break ground this year for Vegas for their ballpark there, but I think just getting out of that dump, Scott, where they used to play in Oakland at the Coliseum there. I think it's just a breath of fresh air for this Oakland A's team, and now obviously called the Sacramento A's, but I'm still going to call them throughout the Oakland A's throughout the season there. But thoughts on this Oakland A's team, because I feel like they do have both talent, not only on the everyday lineup on the pitching side, but also on the bullpen.
Yeah, just a quick trivia question. Do you know which MLB player received the highest A's contract in the history of the franchise?
I want to say just off the top of my head, this season is Severino.
That is correct.
All right, there we go.
Tells you how poverty the organization actually is. Luis Severino, the highest paid player in the history of the franchise. Now, the A's, I do want to point out, even though Oakland as an actual stadium was a train wreck, and everyone
Right.
knows how bad it was, and a lot of fans didn't go. There were some actual protests, you know what I'm talking about. Like, it was
Sell
rough.
the team.
The ownership was a joke. They tried to ship them off to Vegas, and now they're in Sacramento for about a season or two. But Oakland last year, despite going a couple, once again, they ended up with 69 wins. They were 38-43 at home. So even though the actual home ballpark wasn't a good ballpark by any means, they actually won close to 500. Their record was actually significantly better at home than on the road. So my question for you is, one, do you think fans will actually show up in Sacramento? And B, do you think that it's actually going to hurt them in the short term because they were randomly good in the Coliseum last year for their own standards?
I don't think it'll hurt them. I honestly am in the belief that they were just ready to get the hell out of there, despite how great their record was at home last season. And I do think fans will show up in Sacramento. I know, a lot of times when we see, just referencing the NBA, that when the Kings, I guess, are good, like they have been compared to past where it wasn't very exciting, that those Kings fans do show up. So I think I don't want to say they'll completely sell out the stadium that they're playing in, but I think the fans will show up for the Oakland A's there. So like you mentioned, it'll be 1 or 2 seasons, but I think that because Sacramento, the city, hasn't had a professional baseball team, I don't think ever, um, that having a team there at least for 1 or 2 seasons, that maybe excites some of the fans in the population there. So I think it'll help them.
See, maybe it's just me because I know that you live in a state with a bunch of different sports teams. I live in a state with a bunch of different
Yeah.
sports teams, but I am wondering, like, is the attendance supposed to be that good in Sacramento? Because it's a bridge location. I can't imagine Sacramento really just becoming an A's city when they're only using them as a stopover, basically, to Vegas. So that's kind of
Yeah.
what I'm wondering. Like, do you think people in Sacramento actually want to go to a team or to go see their games when they're not actually like for Sacramento? They're just using Sacramento as a temporary resting spot.
Yeah, I mean that's a good point. It's also in West Sacramento
Yeah.
there as well.
But the
So
Kings are at least like that's their hometown team. They have a
right,
team.
yeah,
Sacramento still doesn't. They're just like using
yeah,
Sacramento as temporary, like just as a location. That's kind of what I'm wondering. I don't know how the attendance is actually going to be in Sacramento for this team, but
yeah.
I do want to point out though that I feel like this team is better than the Angels. If I had to go based on the actual roster, they made some moves in the
Hmm.
pitching staff. They ended up getting Severino. They got Springs. They ended up getting Urshela at third base. Damn, they got a lot of former Yankees with Severino, with Urshela, with Andujar. I mean, they got Rooker, who's really good, but I do wonder how much longer he's going to be there. They got Mason Miller, who's solid as a closer. Yeah, I think as a
Yeah,
whole, Oakland, they ended up winning 69 last year. The question is, can they get to like 72? I think they can. I think that it's a pretty low
yeah.
number that's actually attainable, but it also comes down to once again Sacramento. So if you think that they're going to lose more games than they did last year at home, or at home, I'll put quotes around it, it's going to be tough
Hmm.
to actually win 72 because they were solid in the Coliseum last year for a really bad team. And I am wondering if the lack of familiarity in Sacramento might hurt them in the short term. That's my
Yeah.
only
So I'll
problem
just
that I have here.
Yeah, so I pulled up the actual the park, I should say, they're going to be playing in. So the official name is Sutter Health Park. It's in West Sacramento, and it's saying that it's going to be their home for the next 3 seasons
Yeah.
for
Mhm.
the Oakland A's. So I think that fans will get out there. I'm not, again, like I mentioned, they're not going to probably sell it out, but also, and this article is on MLB.com, saying that it's part of the Pacific Coast League, which boasts arguably the most hitter-friendly environments in all of minor league baseball. So maybe something, Scott, that we need to write down to keep an eye on if this is going to be a hitter-friendly ballpark. That maybe the books don't adjust to, if there are a lot of runs being scored or a lot of home runs being hit, that maybe that's not something the books don't quite adjust to quickly, and something we could take advantage of early in the season. There's something that maybe you want to keep in mind here when they do play their games, or their 81 home games in Sacramento. But as far as the roster goes, Scott, I mean, look, like you mentioned some of the names, Brett Rooker, Lawrence Butler at the top of their lineup. Added, some former Yankees, Gio Urshela is there. Luis Severino, we talked about. Jeffrey Springs is interesting there as well. Mason Miller, another guy in their bullpen. So, um, we said they won 69 games last year. Honestly, I it's crazy to sound, but I feel like this could be a team that could surprise in the American League and maybe even compete for a wild card spot. And again, that's probably my hot take for this upcoming season. But I think there is something to this Oakland A's team. So I like the over 71 and a half. I think they would probably have to get maybe 85 wins, we think, if they need a playoff spot in the American League there.
I mean,
But that's kind
to
of
be
where I'm
honest, you're by yourself right now because I'm not going to go that far with Oakland.
at.
Like, I'll let you have the floor on that one, but we do agree on the over. I
Yeah.
see them being a 73-74 win team, which is slightly improved. The the rotation should be better, and we'll see if some of the younger guys come along. Because Butler kind of came out of nowhere. Like Rooker,
Right.
we knew had talent. Butler
Yeah.
just emerged onto the scenes and became a serious threat in this lineup. So we'll see if maybe with added film on the guy, if he'll regress or not. It's always an issue you run into when you have a hot hitter for basically half a season. Is if he can replicate what he did the year prior, or if maybe the film is out on the guy and then he'll regress. So we'll see. But I got more 73-74 range, which is
Sure.
not good, but good enough.
Yeah.
But I do think that 71.5 feels a bit low. For an Oakland team that, in a rare turn of events, actually bought at the during free agency, they
Hmm.
actually got some starters that can help them to some degree. Like
Yeah.
Oakland doesn't really make, I'd say, overall improvements to the roster ever. But that's also maybe a testament to the fact that they were done with the Oakland era and they wanted to move on. And one of the
Yeah.
first signs of that was actually investing in free agency.
Yeah. All right. Before we continue the conversation here for the Oakland A's here, let me just tell everyone about our friends over at Edge Boost. SGPN has partnered up with Edge Boost, the premier Visa debit card for bettors. An Edge Boost card allows you to avoid the hassle of having your card denied at the sportsbook, DFS site, sweepstakes site, racetrack, or the casino. Plus, you can earn up to $750 per month in cashback rewards for using your Edge Boost card. And you know your money is safe as the card is FDIC insured. The best part is no credit checks and it's completely free. Sign up today and use the promo code SGPN so you get better cashback rewards and instant tier 2 status. I've been using my Edge Boost card over at Underdog Fantasy. I haven't had any issues and also earning that cash back with Edge Boost. That's edgeboost.bet, promo code SGPN. Again, edgeboost.bet, promo code SGPN. And we're also brought to you by mybookie.ag. MyBookie is your place to place to bet every sport, plus props for every game in the live dealer casino. MyBookie accepts customers from a ton of locations. Easy deposit and lightning fast payouts using crypto. Head to mybookie.ag, promo code SGPN for a 100% deposit match up to $1,000 plus a $10 casino trip. That's mybookie.ag, promo code SGPN. Yeah. Anything else, Scott, for the Oakland A's? Do we think they'll be
I mean,
buyers at the trade deadline? Or they be sellers? What do you think?
I mean, some of it might come down to the perfect situation
Yeah.
regarding some players. You never know on other franchises which teams are going to want to blow it up. Maybe they can find a nice deal available for them. Maybe I'm just biased because I haven't seen Oakland buy at the deadline in years, or when they
Yeah,
do,
that's
it's a
true.
rental for like
Yeah.
some, I don't know, like bench bat or something like that. But do I think they'll actually be ultra aggressive? No. See, the thing is, it comes down to how good you think Oakland's going to be. You sound
Yeah.
like you're in the territory where maybe they would surprise people and maybe they will make a move at the deadline.
Yeah.
I don't think they'll be good enough to do that. I think that Oakland is going to be fine to let the younger guys come along. They're going to be not in the basement of the division for the second straight year. That's where we're at. But do I think they suddenly are going to be ultra aggressive in a spot where maybe they could be? No, I don't. I think that they might just let the young guys grow. Maybe if they are really good early or like in the hunt, they can consider it. But I don't see them being good enough in the first half in a brand new stadium. So
Yeah.
I'm going to say no for this year, maybe next year. Maybe next year, if they can continue growing, then they'll make
Mhm.
some moves, be aggressive midseason. But I can't really remember the last time Oakland was a buyer at the deadline. That's got to be years ago at this point, right?
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. That's for sure. For this Oakland A's team. All right. Let's get to the cream of the crop here in the AL West division. We'll take it from win total, and that is going to be the first team, the Seattle Mariners. They are currently have a win projection of 84.5 for this upcoming season, plus 250 to win the AL West division. Their pennant odds are sitting at 11-1, and for them to win the World Series this season at 28-1. Last season, this team did finish with 85 wins. We're really good at T-Mobile Park, 49 wins of the 81 that they do play there. The area that they did get into trouble, number one, was on their road games where they were just 36-45, 9 games under 500 um, on the road last year. And again, a team that just struggled offensively for, you could say, majority of the season, because this was one of 4 teams last season, Scott, in this division that was in the bottom fourth when it came to these offensive statistical categories that we look at, whether it's, you know, basics, offensive numbers or even the advanced numbers for the Seattle Mariners team. Didn't make a whole heck of a lot of moves in the offseason. They do have Victor Robles slated to be in their top of the top of the lineup at the one spot. And then you see the return of Randy Arozarena, Julio Rodriguez. We'll get into all that here momentarily. But of course, I do think this is one of the better pitching staffs in the MLB, frankly, with Logan Gilbert, Luis Castillo, and George Kirby as their number 1, 2, and 3 guys. And then Bryce Miller, who I think had a pretty good season last year, and Brian Wu in his home games, at least last year in T-Mobile Park, Scott, was really good. So I feel like the starting rotation is pretty deep here. It's what am I going to get out of this offense this upcoming season that propels them to, number one, getting into the playoffs and possibly making some noise here. But I think the first step for this team is going to go out, number one, to get into the playoffs, whether that's winning by the division or the AL wild card spot here. But what are your thoughts about this Mariners team?
Yeah, so they won 85 last year. So as you said before, they're basically projected the same thing that happened last year. I couldn't stand their offseason. I thought the Mariners had an atrocious offseason from start to finish. They didn't do anything.
Yeah.
They just sat there with one of the best rotations in the entire league. From 1 to 5, you could argue that it's a top 3 rotation, top 2 rotation in the entire league. Dodgers are playing a separate sport right now. So you could argue that once again, they're the best American League rotation in that entire half of the league.
I think so.
And their only move during the offseason offensively was to pick up Victor Robles. Are you serious? You couldn't do anything else?
Yeah.
Like, really? I know that they made a move mid-season last year. They got a Arozarena, which completely backfired. I mean, he was horrible.
Yeah.
You're looking at what else they have. I mean, they got Rowdy Tellez off the bench, I guess. Like Donovan Solano. You got Mitch Haniger, who might be coming off the bench for Robles. But, I mean, this lineup's atrocious.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I feel like it's a really tough spot because they basically built their entire identity on being the Guardians without Jose Ramirez. Like, I don't really know what to tell you. Like, Julio Rodriguez was supposed to have a monster season last year. He was projected as one of the MVP, I'd say, I don't want to say favorites, but like dark horse candidates.
Sure.
And he proceeded to hit 20 home runs for 68 RBIs. So he had a career low in batting average, career low in on-base percentage, career low in home runs, and a career low in RBIs. So your best player regressed to some degree. I know that he kind of came on a bit later, but he had a monster 32 home run season, 103 RBIs the year prior. So you need Julio to wake up again, and you need him to kind of go back to what he was a couple years ago. But they didn't give him much support in the lineup. You got Cal Raleigh over there who's going to have home runs, but the on-base percentage can be an issue because the whole team doesn't really get on base enough. I'm going to ask you because the rotation's insane, but this lineup is brutal. Like, I think that we're going to talk about Texas and Houston in a second. Houston could argue got worse. We'll talk about them in a second.
Mm-hmm.
Texas had a down year after winning the World Series.
Yeah.
So you're probably expecting a bounce back from them, especially if DeGrom can actually live for like a couple months compared to last year.
Yeah.
This division arguably got better. If you want to talk about Oakland, I might go with the under on Seattle, like 84.5. They can't hit. And for the rotation, they had some injuries here or there. I know Wu missed some time, but they were mostly healthy for the rotation last year. The bullpen, I like Munoz as their closer. Do I like their other options? Not really. I think Brash is good. But the other relievers, you got like Snyder and Santos and like Trent Thornton. Like, I don't like the rest of their bullpen either. I don't know how many pieces on this team I actually like. The rotation's great. Julio, I think, solid. I wonder if he's as good as, Seattle fans hope he's going to end up being. I don't know if he's that good. But what do you like about this team? Because there are a lot of, I'd say, glaring weaknesses, and the front office did absolutely nothing to help fix any of those issues.
Yeah, and again, it just goes back to what we've been talking about, is that what am I going to get out of the offense for this Seattle Mariners team? And for them not to do anything serious to solidify or at least help this everyday lineup by adding some pop into the lineup and adding guys that can get on base and hit for average. I think you're putting a lot of pressure on, number one, Julio, and again, for him to be the best player in this everyday lineup and in your outfield, he's going to have to be that guy. He's going to have to be, like you mentioned, in that conversation as a dark horse for MVP, or at least in the conversation of being an MVP, and he's going to have to play at that level. I feel like a lot of it just depends on Randy Arozarena because there's just been a lot of hype around him when he was with the Tampa Bay Rays. He had a couple seasons there where he could have been a top 20, 30 player in the MLB. But again, you have Luke Raley, Mitch Haniger. They have slated at the DH, JP Crawford at shortstop, Jorge Polanco, and Dylan Moore is what they're slated to as their projected lineup for 2025. So it could be a situation where, if for the first couple or months that if they are again coming slow out of the gate, as far as offense, that they may have to go out and trade for another big bat or another bat in this lineup, because like you mentioned, this rotation is not only one of the best in the American League, but you can put it up there in the entire MLB there as well. So my inclination is still to go with the under until I see improvement from this offense, at least on a consistent basis for the Seattle Mariners team. I know they play in a pitcher-friendly ballpark, which I think obviously only helps your starting pitchers. I think Brian Wu was a pitcher last year that was absolutely fantastic at home for them last season when he was healthy. But number one, the improvement has to come on the offensive side for this team, Scott, and then also on the road, because like I mentioned, they were 9 games under 500 on the road last year. So I'm going to go under 84.5 for the Seattle Mariners team. I don't think right now, as this everyday projected lineup is constructed, that they could be right now in the conversation for an American League pennant or even, frankly, even the World Series. Their first step has to be at least getting into the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, the main problem that we talk about with the offense is the fact that you mentioned, well, maybe they will make a move. But based on what we saw during the offseason and kind of how the Arozarena move went last year, do you have faith in this team to actually make a move if needed? Because I don't. I feel like the problem you're running into is that Seattle's front office seems to be pretty passive, and it seems like they're not fully willing to invest in how to help the team win immediately. But the main issue for Seattle is the team can't get on base. They led the league in strikeouts last year. They were the only team to average over 10 strikeouts per game offensively. The on-base percentages are horrible. The batting averages are really bad, too. So they didn't do anything. Like, I feel like if we're talking about what type of, I'd say, moves that certain teams made, Oakland fixed part of the rotation. The Angels, I know you could argue, are still bad, but at least, they ended up trying to move Trout around. They're trying something new. Seattle just keeps slamming their head against the wall, and I'm not really sure what the actual logic is behind the moves. We said before, the offense is the serious problem with this team. They went out knowing that was the issue and knowing the offense was a mess all year and did absolutely nothing besides signing Victor Robles. I don't know how I'm supposed to take this team seriously if the front office clearly doesn't.
Maybe having Edgar Martinez as the senior director and hitting strategy coach maybe helps them, but
I like Edgar Martinez, but at the same point, I just don't understand the direction this team wants to go. You have a phenomenal rotation.
Yeah.
And you're doing nothing to help the team progress and to make the playoffs, because Seattle had that crazy comeback win in the playoffs against Toronto a couple years ago. They were fun for a bit, and they didn't do anything to capitalize on that momentum. They just decided to sit still and do nothing. So I got Seattle being a 500 team. I think they're like 81-81.
Yeah, I think it's in that range of like 80 to 83 for me for the Seattle Mariners team. And then again, like we mentioned, a lot of it just comes down to the offense. And frankly, I think it's a sign that I don't know what to say they're not serious, but there should have been a made move at least on the offensive side of things, which then kind of begs the question that if this team is underperforming,
they might trade some pieces.
And that's what my question to you was going to be, that if, hey, look, if this is a team that's going to be struggling and they don't have a chance to make the playoffs or a wild card spot, let's just say a team comes knocking on the door for the services of Luis Castillo or, Logan Gilbert. I don't think they'll trade George Kirby. I think Luis Castillo would be the guy that would probably be on the move there. And you blow up a rotation that's, like we talked about, it's one of the best there because you didn't do anything on the offensive side of things. So I think that's a possibility for the Seattle Mariners team as well.
That's where I'm at too. I just don't know what the direction is for this team. And it seems like they don't know what the direction is either. They just keep delaying making some potential moves for whatever reason. And they're trying to further evaluate the current roster. We know what the roster looks like. It's been the same roster for 2-3 years. I don't really know what you're trying to prove now, but they strike me as a 500 team. And once again, they were pretty healthy for the most part in that rotation. Wu got injured to start the year. He came back late. He looked pretty sharp. But I do wonder if there are some injuries involved in the rotation. They got nothing.
No.
Like, as a backup plan. Like, they got problems. So they could sell at the deadline. That wouldn't shock me either. So, once again, I'll go 81-81.
Yeah. All right, before we get over to the two Texas teams in this AL West division, let me tell everyone about our friends over at Rhythm. Rhythm is throwing an epic March Madness party, and you're invited. All Rhythm users are invited to a first four watch party Wednesday, March 19th at the Awesome Stadium Swim at Circa Las Vegas. Free drinks, plus you get to hang out with the guys from Sports Gambling Podcast and the College Experience. And it gets better. Rhythm is also giving away a $250 March Madness future for one random lucky Rhythm user. Even if you can't make the party, you can still win the future bet. Just sign up for your 7-day free trial at sportsgamblingpodcast.com/rhythm. That's sportsgamblingpodcast.com/rhythm, and come by and use Rhythm to help you fill out your bracket and make some bets while you are there. A free party plus a chance at a $250 future bet. Go to sportsgamblingpodcast.com/party for details at sportsgamblingpodcast.com/party. We're also brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. NBA, NHL, college basketball, whatever your sport is, you can cash in big with Underdog Fantasy Pick'em. Underdog is offering a Luka Doncic discount for every Lakers game for the rest of the regular season. Also, for the football diehards, Pick'em projections for select 40-yard dash times during this week's NFL Combine. So sign up with promo code MLB SGPN to claim your special pick and first-time deposit offer up to $1,000 in bonus cash and bonus credits. UnderdogFantasy.com. Make sure that promo code MLB SGPN. All right, Scott, let's get over to the two Texas teams. We'll go first with the Texas Rangers. They have a win total this season of 85.5, division odds of plus 225 to win the AL pennant, 10-1, and for them to win the World Series at 25-1. Last season was, you can say, the World Series hangover for this Texas Rangers team. They finished the season 78-84, 44-37 at Global Life Field. And again, another team that did struggle on the road. And frankly, this entire division struggled last year on the road. The only team that had a winning record, which was the Astros, which were 4 games above 500 on the road. But this was a team that came off their World Series title just 2 seasons ago. But number one, the World Series hangover. But I think the thing that set this team back last year was all the injuries that they dealt with, right? Because the year that they won the World Series and throughout that season, Scott, the offense was just clicking on all cylinders. A team that we would bet a lot on their team totals to go over just because they had the firepower when they made that World Series one. And again, the pitching, we'll get into that here momentarily as well. But last year you looked at this team and some of the younger guys that they were expecting to be out there, the Josh Jungs of the world, Evan Carter, those two guys at least played only 91 combined games for their team last year. Marcus Semien, 159, Adolis Garcia, 154. Wyatt Langford played on 134 last year. I think the bigger question mark was the pitching last year. But what are your thoughts about this Rangers team coming into the season with a win total of 85.5?
Yeah, so you mentioned injuries were a big factor. That's definitely true. Another issue is a lot of their main guys forgot how to hit. Adolis Garcia was really bad last year. Carter was projected to be a potential Rookie of the Year candidate or favorite, and he was really bad. Jung was injured when the season started. He really never got going. So as you said before, they were victims of injury, but also just a lot of guys just not performing well. Adolis, after helping the team win a World Series, was as bad as you could possibly imagine. And you have to hope that Adolis can make a bounce back for the season. For the rotation, DeGrom right now is listed. He's going to be on an innings limit, so we'll see how long he actually survives. But you have Uvalde, you got injured too. DeGrom barely pitched last year. You have John Gray, you have Molly, and you have Bradford. So the rotation is, I'll say meh for now, but you could argue not that great because you have one reliable starter, with DeGrom having a serious question mark next to him. But of course, he can be really good if he's healthy. For the bullpen, right now their listed closer is arguably like Chris Martin or Robert Garcia. You don't have many great options in the bullpen, so that is definitely a weak link for this Rangers team. But we have seen in years past that they are willing to invest at the deadline if they really want to, pick up a piece and they are competitive. So unlike Seattle and unlike maybe Oakland or the Angels, this is a team that should be a buyer at the deadline if I had
Yeah.
to project where they'll be at. So I do like that when I factor in a win total. I'll go with the over on this team. I don't want to say last year was a fluke, but they won 78 games last year, and it
Yeah.
was a season from hell.
Yeah.
Like almost everything that could have gone wrong went wrong, and they were
Mm-hmm.
still near 500.
Yep.
I still think that Texas is a better team than they showed last year. I'm not saying they're going to go back and, potentially win another World Series, but I think Bochy will do a good job of getting the team back on track. Assuming they stay healthy, the lineup should still be very good. I like their lineup on paper. Assuming
Yeah.
Garcia is going to find his groove again, Carter hopefully can perform well. Jung, we think, is a solid player. He just got injured. They got Jock Peterson. I like that as a
Mhm.
potential DH option. They got Jake Berger. I know that's Malcolm's favorite player.
Yeah.
He had a good year in general in Miami, and I think that he'll help out the offense at first base. They have a lot of guys offensively that can be dangerous, and I think that if the pitching staff can hang in there to some degree, you could argue that they're the opposite of Seattle because the offense is good and the pitching staff's a bit of a problem, but
Mhm.
I think Texas is basically guaranteed to further invest in being contenders mid-season.
Yeah.
And I do like that, I'd say, in the back of my mind, knowing they can go on a second half run to maybe push them to 90 wins. So I'll go with the over on Texas. I don't mind division. Can they maybe make some noise in the playoffs with Bochy? He can make noise with anybody
Yeah.
in the playoffs. So maybe that's worth consideration. But I'll go over on Texas. Unless they get killed by injuries again, I
Mhm.
see their floor being around 86, 87. So I'll go over.
And also for the pitching rotation, they also have Jack Leiter and Kumar Rocker there as well, right? That are their top prospects when it comes to the pitching side of things.
I
But
think everyone in Texas wants to forget that lighter season last year. But yes, they are
yeah,
still there.
yeah.
So we'll see.
And then you talk about this everyday lineup. It's guys that are at the top of at least your lineup are guys that can also hit for average, get on base, but also can hit for power.
Mhm.
Corey Seager last year played in, I think it was 123 games last year, and he still finished the season with 30 home runs for this Texas Rangers team. And I think you'll get that bounce back this season from Adolis Garcia. Marcus Semien has been very consistent. The batting average was down for him last year at 237. He only had a 308 on base percentage, 391 slugging, 699 OPS. But again, from top to bottom, and the Jake Berger edition giving them some more power. You mentioned Jock Peterson in the lineup here as well. So, and also when you talk about, we didn't talk about the managers for some of the other teams, but you hit the nail on the head. Is that if this team gets into the playoffs, you have Bruce Bochy, and he works his magic. I mean, his resume speaks for itself when he gets into the playoffs. So I like the over for this team here as well. I think that this is a team that you mentioned that they could be buyers at the trade deadline. Excuse me. That if they need to add another arm into that pitching rotation, they'll be able to do that. Whatever you do get out of Jacob DeGrom, great. Because again, like you mentioned, he will be on an innings limit for this Rangers team to start. But the key thing for him is just keep him healthy. Just God forbid another injury does happen if you're a Rangers fan to Jacob DeGrom, because when healthy, we saw it early in his career that one of the most dominant pitchers, but health has just been the biggest concern for him. So, if he's able to go, I don't know, 120 innings, 130 innings, something in that range for this Rangers team, I think that would be absolutely fantastic for them. And just having them healthy, if they do get to the postseason, that's only a great plus for this Rangers team. So, I love the roster as constructed. I think they could use a couple more arms in the bullpen. But again, that's something that you can definitely add throughout the season. So, I think this is my favorite win total. I think for the entire MLB, this win total for the Texas Rangers at over 85.5. And you mentioned the division odds. I do expect them to win this division this upcoming season in the AL West. So very high on the Texas Rangers this upcoming season. Anything else for the Rangers?
Not really. I mean, I put it in the live chat. I think, a reminder, by the way, we do the live stream. So if you want to pop in, leave a question, you can on the live stream. I think it's a good buy low spot. I'm not saying that once again this team is going to come all the way back to being a World Series contender, but I do think after everything that could possibly go wrong went wrong for them last year, the sportsbooks might have been, I'd say, overcorrecting to some degree towards the unders on their stuff. I think that 85.5 is a pretty decent number to potentially capitalize on, because assuming this team stays healthy and assuming Garcia isn't a complete just waste of space in that lineup, which he basically was for most of the season. I do think this team, talent-wise, is good enough to get to 87, 88, even with like below average pitching,
Yeah.
like slightly below average pitching.
Mhm.
But we're going to talk about Houston in a second. There aren't many teams in this division that I'm actually high on.
Yeah.
Oakland, I think, will go over the win total, but I
Mhm.
still have them in the 70s. We think Seattle's going to underachieve. We think the Angels are a joke of a franchise. So we're running out of teams here. Like, unless you think the first place team in this division is going to win like 84, 85 games, then by default, you're probably picking Texas to go over because you're low on the other teams.
Yeah, right there with you. I think that, we talked about the previous three teams. We're in agreement about the under for those teams. Sorry, we do like the over
Oakland
for the
over, but
A's.
once again, we don't have them being a 500, or at least I don't have them being a 500 team.
Yeah, look, last season in this division, I mean, look, the Astros had 88 wins. We'll talk about a team in a second. They went under their win total. Mariners, I'm not sure if what their win total was last year. My guess would be it was around 84 and a half, 85 and a half maybe last year, but then Texas ended up going under. Oakland did get over, and I think the Angels also went under their win total as well. So I don't want to say the guard is changing, but it's a division where these teams were struggling on the road. I think that was what was really the downfall for some of these, or I should say four of the five teams in this division, because the Astros were the only one team that had a winning record on the road. Speaking of those Astros, last team in this division, they have a win total of 87 and a half. For this upcoming season, division odds of plus 125. They are the favorites to win the division. Plus 650 for the American League pennant, and 15-1 to win the World Series this upcoming year. And, for this Astros team, your core five guys that you had when you were making those runs to the American League Championship Series and to the World Series, only one guy's left, and that's Jose Altuve. When you talked about Kyle Tucker, Alex Bregman, Carlos Correa, George Springer, and Jose Altuve, he's the only one left. Yes, you have Yordan Alvarez, when healthy, one of the best hitters in the entire MLB. But this, at least on the offensive side, Scott, this team looks completely different now. Guys that are going to have to step up, but also the pitching rotation also, I think, leaves a lot to be desired. A lot of upside for the pitching rotation. But again, I'll mention a pitcher, which I think is going to be the biggest question mark for this upcoming season for this Houston Astros team. But want to get your thoughts on this Astros team, currently sitting at 87.5 wins.
Yeah, so I think I'm a bit higher on this team than you are. I'm not saying that I think Houston's going to be a great team this season, but there are a lot of question marks regarding this actual division, and I feel like Houston probably has the second best rotation behind Seattle here. They won 88 games last year. Tucker, I know, was the best player on the team when healthy. The problem was he only played 78 games. So Tucker missed more than half the season. Yordan got injured again. What else is new?
Yeah.
And they found a way to win 88 games. So I do wonder if 87.5 is a bit low. I think you're looking at a spot where Houston, I think the rotation's fine. I mean, Valdez I like. Brown can be up and down. He was great basically in the second half of the season. Arrighetti was really bad early on in his career, and then he kind of turned it around. Garcia's been injured lately. Blanco, we know, can be solid as well. I think the rotation's pretty good. Now, Hader as a closer was kind of a mess. He was terrible in the playoffs. They got Abreu. They got Bryant. I mean, I think the bullpen's okay. I think it's fine, but I think the actual rotation is good. Now, for the lineup, they made a lot of different changes. They got Paredes at third base, who's going to take over Bregman's spot. I think he's fine. You're looking at Christian Walker taking first base. I'm fine with that, too. He's injured a lot, too, though, so keep an eye out for Walker's health.
Yeah.
And Yordan's hurt a lot, too. So a lot of it comes down to injury. Altuve's supposed to play left field.
Yep.
Good luck with that. We'll see how it goes, but I might actually go over on Houston. I think Houston is a team that I kind of just trust more based on maybe personal bias because they've tormented my favorite team for about a decade and a half at this point. But I trust Houston as a franchise more than the other teams in this division. I think Houston, even though they lost a couple of key pieces via trade or free agency, they had a lot of injuries last year too.
Yeah.
And they still got to 88. So I'll go over. I think I just trust them more. I'll put it this way. I think they have the highest floor of all five of these teams. And I think that things can definitely go well with this rotation. to push them into what could be the 90s. I'll go over, not a confident play, but I can see them sneaking to 91, something like that. I think 87.5 is a pretty sharp number, in my opinion.
Yep.
But based
Mhm.
on maybe the last couple of years and how just consistently solid they are, I think this number feels a bit low to me. I think they'll finish with 89 or 91. So give me somewhere in that range. I'll go over personally. I have a feeling you're going to go under, but I'll go over.
Yeah, it's a trend. I think the transition year was last year with the team, obviously with a new manager. Question marks about the future of Alex Bregman if they were going to sign him to a long-term deal. Framber Valdez is the next guy up, and with Jim Crane as the owner, he hasn't been a guy that's dished out contract extensions. Case in point, with Jose Altuve being the only guy in this that's kind of left from that championship core when this team turned it around and was actually a legitimate World Series contender. I think a lot of it does come down to, and going back to last year, what you mentioned, Scott, that this was a team that started 7-19 last year. They were 13-24 after that series against the New York Yankees mid-May. So they really did turn it around in the second half of the year. Did this Astros team? The question mark I think is going to become is what they do with Framber Valdez, because it seems from everything that I'm reading here locally and just based on the history of the the ownership and about dishing out money, it feels like he may be a pitcher that they trade at the trade deadline because they don't like dishing out the money. But I do think a lot of it does come down to this rotation. Hunter Brown is supposed to be Verlander 2.0. He had a pretty decent year last year.
He was terrible in the first half. He caught fire at the end. So
yeah, I think that was the case with a lot of these guys. Except for Ronald Blanco, I think he had that suspension or for something last year. But he was really good in the beginning of the year. Arrighetti, you mentioned it, a guy that was off to an atrocious start. Christian Javier was a pitcher last year that got injured there as well. And I don't know what they want to do with him because he's been a guy that's started games for them, a guy that they've been bringing out of the bullpen there as well. So right now they have 6 to 7 guys that they can have in that everyday, or I should say in that pitching rotation. And again, Lance McCullers Jr. is another guy that hasn't pitched since I think it was like 2021. He's just had bad luck with injuries. So he's a guy that is seeming like that he may be ready to go for the season. But again, he might be a pitcher that might be on a innings count or limitation of him just to kind of start out the season, see where he's at. So
I think it could be a reliever, to be honest, after all the injuries he's had.
Yeah, and I think that makes sense for him as well. So maybe if you put Christian Javier and Lance McCullers Jr. into that bullpen and just adding up, more depth there with Abreu and Josh Hader. You mentioned Hader. I mean, can he get back to the form where what he was with the Milwaukee Brewers, where he was an all-star and just a shutdown relief pitcher and a closer? That's going to be the biggest question mark. And also, from what I've read, maybe you've heard of this as well. I know he's been linked to the Yankees as well with Nolan Arenado as a possibility for this Astros team to come play, whether it's third base or somewhere else, or come in DH, find a spot for him because he did. The thing was that he didn't want to waive his no trade clause, knowing that if Alex Bregman came back and was a third baseman, that he probably wouldn't have a place to play.
Yeah.
So that's kind of been reignited. I mean, I could probably sit here for hours and talk about this Astros team, but
I mean, by the way, to interrupt there, I don't know what Arenado's actually worth at this point.
Yeah.
If you trade for Arenado and he does not play third base, what the hell's the point of trading for Nolan Arenado? Because offensively, he's regressed dramatically over the last couple of years. So even the defense isn't as good as it used to be. Arenado's defense, though, is top-tier third base defense, even with regression.
Mm-hmm.
Offensively, though, I don't want to say fallen off a cliff. It's been rough.
Yeah.
So I don't even know if that's a big get if Houston gets him, but I don't mind Paredes in general. Yeah. The thing about Houston, they made a couple moves, but they didn't get back a ton of prospects in terms of looking towards the future and kind of punting the present. Yeah. I thought Houston did a pretty decent job. They lost Bregman for nothing. But I figured, if you're going to lose Bregman and Tucker, you wanted some pieces that can fill the void immediately. Mm-hmm. Christian Walker, Paredes, and company, those are decent fill-in spots for what happened.
Yeah.
And I feel like with the moves they made, they are still trying to be relevant right now. and they would, like always, buy at the deadline. They're one of the more
Yeah,
aggressive franchises in the league when it comes to buying. I
yeah.
liked their offseason as a whole. I know
Hmm.
losing Bregman and losing Tucker hurts, but they could have gone a lot more farm system play, a lot, more of the farm
Yeah.
system, I'd say, route. And they chose to go for the present route.
Hmm.
And I feel like that kind of encourages me to buy on Houston because this team is still looking to now instead of the future.
Yeah, and they also have Cam Smith as their top prospect, who's a third baseman there as well. I don't think that he'll be up or a consistent guy or an everyday guy for this Astros team, at least for this season. So the Arnado conversation, I think, is gonna be there until maybe he does get traded somewhere else. But I think the number's spot on for this Astros team. They could be a 90-win team, or I think they could be a team that wins 85 games and gets under this number here. So I think for the sake of the show, I'll go under 87.5 wins. I'm just a little bit more concerned about the pitching rotation of just finding consistency from there. And if they're able to carry that or carry this team throughout the season, I think the offense will be fine, but it's just a lot of it does come down to the pitching for me. So I'll go under 87.5 here for this Houston Astros team.
Well, I do want to ask you, though,
Yeah.
since we're talking about them finishing, you think they're going to finish below 87.5.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean you think Houston misses the playoffs?
See, since there's 3 spots now in the wild card, I think they can still get a wild card spot. I think their division run is over now. I think it is for the Texas Rangers there, but I think 85 probably gets you into the playoffs, and I think that was a number that we mentioned with the Seattle Mariners. If the Astros get around 85, and I think they go 2 or 3 games above their win total, like finish with 90 wins, or it's like they finish like around 85, 86 when they would just snuck under this total. So I feel like I think the number's spot on for this Astros team. But to answer your question, I do think they do get into the playoffs.
Yeah, for a reference, by the way, the wild card teams last year had 86.
Okay.
In the
Yeah.
American
So I
League.
think that's
So
where I'm at with this Astros team. So
I was
I
asking
think
because them to miss the playoffs is plus 145, but it sounds like there could be a middle where they actually could make the playoffs and go under. But I was wondering if you had a preference, one or the other.
and this has been a team, I think, over the past couple seasons where they have came out slow out of the gate. Case in point, last year where they were 13-24, and the
Yeah.
season prior. I'm trying to pull it up here if I
There
can
were rumors
find
they're
it
going to
for this
trade half the
Astros
team when they were 13-24.
Yeah, so they got off to a really good start in the 2023 season, but again, a lot of it for me, I think, just depends on the starting rotation. You got anything else for the Astros?
Yeah, I think you mentioned as the guy to keep an eye on is Valdez or maybe Hunter Brown. I got my eye on Arrighetti, who
Okay.
I was very low on early because I kept fading him early in his career and he kept getting just blown up in all these starts. He
Mhm.
was pretty good last year. I feel like, or I should say, I'll put it this way. Since it was technically one season, he was really bad to start the season. Then he kind of found his groove like Hunter Brown did. The strikeouts at the end of the year were kind of crazy. I do wonder if he can actually piece it together. We know Houston's pitching, actual just coaching staff has done such a great job of, I'd say, either finding second wins for
Mhm.
veteran players or even just helping the young players grow. I do think Arrighetti has a certain level that he showed me last year that I didn't think he had. And I do wonder if Arrighetti can keep that going for maybe even an entire season, if him and Brown look sharp for, let's say, 2/3 of the season instead of half. Can they get to 90? I think they can. So maybe I'll just buy on the brand, which might be a bit biased, but they do a good job with pitchers. They'll plug and play a bunch of pitchers, and they tend to be, I'd say, improved more often than not when they join Houston. I'll bank
Yep.
on that pedigree. So that's kind of why I'm high on Houston.
Yeah, it's also the fact, like you mentioned, that they do turn into buyers when it does come to the trade deadline for this Astros team. So, um, yeah, we'll leave that at that for this Astros team. All right, Scott. Let's do some best bets for this division. Bet win total, and then who do you think wins this division? I'll pull up if there's some underdog fantasy stuff for this division here for the season. But you want to give out your best bet in division winner?
Sure. So for my best bet on this one, I think I am going to go back to the Angels. I think I'm going to go with the under on this one. I was trying to be a bit creative, maybe Seattle under, but in theory, maybe the offense can get going. Who knows? Texas, I think they should go over, but I don't know if I like it enough because injuries could play a factor again. The Astros, I think, should go over, but who knows? It's mostly what the Angels are trying to do because I really can't fully figure it out. I don't think this team's going to be good. Like, I feel like the Angels are rightfully projected to be a last place team. They couldn't even beat out the Athletics last year. You're looking at Trout moving to right field. Will he play more games? Maybe. Do I have complete faith in that? No, because he's been injured pretty much every year for the last couple of years. So
Yeah.
they just have so many question marks, and I feel like not enough answers because they're looking at Soler. You got Adele back in the projected starting lineup. Good luck with that experiment. We tried that for years. It hasn't worked. Moncada's been a mess recently. I don't like the rotation with Kikuchi as their number one. Like, I don't think this team is good. I feel like the Angels are a team that should finish somewhere in the 60s again. That's kind of where I'm at. And Maddie's mentioned the Angels have cashed their under in basically like 7 straight years.
Yeah.
They're guaranteed to go under 500 in basically every year. And I feel like the Angels, even though we might be lower on Seattle, we think Oakland might be improved. Even with Houston and Texas, the Angels, I do think, are the worst team in this division. So that being the case, I see them being bad, and I see them selling like they always do. So maybe they end up selling off Trout. We'll see what happens. But I will go with the under. I don't like the ownership. I don't like the roster. I like their manager. I like Ron Washington, but I feel like it's a bad spot for him. But I'll go under. I see that team finishing kind of like what they did last year, 60s, somewhere in there. Like, I think this win total is too high. My best bet will be the Angels. They go under their win total. For the actual division pick, I'm going to go with Houston.
Okay.
I just think even though I like Texas, they do have some pitching staff question marks, a lot of them, including the bullpen. Last year, at least they had a little bit of back-end relief. This year, they really don't. I think Houston's pitching is actually underrated. When you ignore the really bad start they had last year, they were solid. And I do think if Brown and Arrighetti can keep it going from what happened in the back end of last year, Valdez, I think, solid. They have a decent amount of arms. I think Houston has a nice blend of overall talent, which should give them once again a high floor. A lot of these teams in the division have a high amount of volatility, as far as I'm concerned, and just a lot of variance, the way that I look at these rosters. So I'll go with Houston to win the division. I think Texas hangs in there, but I think Texas eventually falls about a game or two short. Give me Houston to win the division with like 89 wins, give or take. But I am going to go with the Angels win total under at around 71.5. I think that line's too high. I think they finish under that in the 60s.
Yeah, I don't hate the Angels under their 71.5. I'm right there with you. I think my best bet is going to be the Texas Rangers to go over on their win total. I think that it does come down to what we saw from last season to this season, just an improvement. We talk about the World Series hangover, the injuries that they dealt with. I think, like you mentioned, there are going to be some questions about the pitching rotation, but I think this is a team that is definitely going to be biased just because of how great this pitching or the everyday lineup is going to be for this team. So with guys that will be coming back from based off of injuries last year, I really like their top 2 guys in Corey Seager, Marcus Semien. If Adolis Garcia can be a lot better than he was last year, that's going to be great. We mentioned Jock Peterson into this lineup, Jake Berger adding some pop into that lineup. And we've been talking about the young guys, right? Josh Jung, Wyatt Langford. So this team, up and down, their everyday lineup is going to be really, really good. And again, whatever you do get out of Jacob deGrom, I think is going to be fantastic for this team. So, and again, the manager, Bruce Bochy, he's going to find ways to win ball games. He's just one of the brilliant minds in when it does come to the game of baseball. So I'll go with the Rangers to go over their win total, and I'll just double down on them to win this division as well at plus 225-ish. Like we always say, definitely shop around, get the best number for this. And when it comes to the futures odds, because again, you're going to have your money tied up for a very, very long period of time when it comes to the MLB season for 162 games. So, I'll put my faith here on the Texas Rangers. This kind of tells you that we're completely unbiased when it comes to baseball and our teams, because I'm picking the rival in the state of Texas to win this division. And for I don't know how many years that the Astros beat up on the Yankees, that Scott is on the Astros at least to win this division for this upcoming season. All right, Scott, let me see if I can find some MLB season stuff here. I don't see it on the board, so maybe we'll have to save that for. Oh, wait, I think I do see some stuff here. It'll probably be guys that are okay. Here we go. So there's some guys. I think we should do like 2-pick entry here just for the AL West division. So I'll ask you this. What do we think about Mike Trout, higher or lower 26.5 home runs hit this season?
I mean, don't I have to go with the lower because he's never healthy?
Yeah. I think so.
And I like Trout as a player, but
I
just
love
don't
him
know
as a player, yeah.
How am I supposed to predict that he's going to get 30 when he plays less than 100 games in basically every season? Like, that's just an insane pace.
Yeah. Yeah, so we'll go lower on that. And then any particular player that intrigues you in this division for anything as far as home runs, hits, RBIs?
So I actually want to ask you, do they have Arrighetti strikeouts?
Let's see. Spencer.
He struck out 171 guys in 145 innings.
They do not, unfortunately.
Do they have Jordan home runs?
Yeah, they have that one at 35.5. I just saw.
All right, so let me just quickly see what Jordan's recent numbers have been, because I like the lower on initial thought. Yeah, he's only gone over 35 one time. And
it's the health with him, right?
He played 147 last year, which is a career high. Yep. So if you want to go for some regression that could be in store, maybe you actually want to consider a lower on Jordan.
All right.
We'll just go with the injury-prone players to get injured again.
Yeah, there we go. All right, so for the AL West division for our MLB season entry, we're going to go with Mike Trout, lower 26.5 home runs. And then we'll go Jordan Alvarez, lower 35.5 home runs for this upcoming season for the AL West division. And that, my friends, is going to do it here for this edition of the first division preview for the upcoming MLB season 2025 for the AL West. First of 6 here that we're going to go through for this MLB divisional round. So next one will be on Thursday. Just again, a great reminder, make sure you're subscribed to the MLB Gambling Podcast YouTube channel because you'll get that notification when the guys do go live for the NL East this week. Will be the second of the division previews for this week. So this was a lot of fun going through all the teams here, getting ready for the MLB season. So 1 down, 5 more to go here. But Scott, anything else you want to add before we get out of here?
Not really. Once again, this should be one of the, in my opinion, more unpredictable divisions in the league. So looking forward to the other breakdowns. Of course, should be a fun season. And we're back for a bunch of episodes over the next month.
Yeah, definitely look out for the MLB Gambling Podcast. And we finally have confirmation for the MLB Propcast for this upcoming season. That'll be head by our very own Scott Reichel and Adam Rosenberg. So look out for them. I'm sure they'll do the division previews. And then, of course, during the regular season, they'll get all your player props. And that was another segment that, our fans and our listeners were asking for during the regular season, just because the amount of games that we had to go through, it just turned into a very long podcast. What we just decided to do was just have it expanded into the ML or into the podcast, because we already did NFL, we already do NBA, and the only thing that was missing was the MLB. So I'm very excited for that to be added to the Propcast umbrella with Scott and Adam. But Scott, anything else you want to add about the MLB Propcast?
Should be fun. Should be doing an episode, I think 3 times a week. We'll do some like home run stuff. We'll do some pitching stuff. Should be fun. I think the plan is Adam and I are going to kind of just copy the usual format, which is we'll prepare some props. We'll share them on the show. But point is, if you want some player prop angles, then we got you covered.
Yeah. Definitely looking forward to that. So we'll have more baseball content for this upcoming season. All right, make sure you guys follow Scott over on the Twitter machine at Reichel Radio. You can follow me there as well at SportsNerd824. Till then, good luck with your bets. Let's break these books off, and always remember to let it ride.